Hello and welcome to your mobility and release clinic on rotation dominant alignment. Today's video will show you how to optimize your motion quality and posture if you're suffering from this traditional movement distortion pattern. We'll show you through a handful of stretches and strength exercises to help reestablish your body's natural rhythm and alignment. Our first segment is soft tissue mobilization. You're going to need your fluid kit, which has a variety of different tools to help reduce the tension in overactive muscles associated with your movement and balance. You're going to want to spend about 60 seconds on each of the areas defined, reducing the tension with a ball or foam roller, followed by a neuromuscular stretch to help to elongate the muscle and restore the appropriate range of motion in all of the areas of the body targeted. Let's begin. First muscle is going to be the TFL muscle, or tensor fascia lata. This is the muscle that attaches the pelvis to the IT band on the front of the hip that runs down the length of the side of the hip and then attaches down at the lower proximity of your leg. Now again, this is on your dominant side. Ryan's going to be doing it on his left side, and it's the muscle that flexes and abducts the leg out and internally rotates it. It can get twisted up on the dominant side as your leg likes to decelerate that internal rotation of the knee called the valgus. So what Ryan's going to do is take the ball. He's going to find the spot. Now the TFL attaches up at that front hip line, the ASIS, and it comes down and then in towards the middle, so medial to lateral. So if you feel a little hip bone, that's called the trochanter. It's the elbow of the femur. And then the hip bone, there's a little socket right in there, a little pocket right in there is where you're going to put the ball. So he's going to lay into the ball by rotating his body weight onto a lacrosse ball until the pressure is manageable. So again, we're looking for a solid pressure being put down on that ball, but it shouldn't be painful. There's going to be some pressure. It might be uncomfortable, but not truly painful. So we don't want the muscle to guard. We don't want it to start to flex back. If you feel that, you're going to want to reduce the weight on the ball and come back. Now, once you put the ball on that pressure point, you're going to start to feel it. It's pretty noticeable, right, Ryan? It's not hard to identify. And what you'll notice, it's going to start to feel a deeper stretch or a deeper engagement if you start to bring your leg back into extension behind you. It's going to stretch and start to shear the fibers between the actual pelvis and the ball. And by that, or in that way, you're going to start to break open those fibers. So again, you're going to bring it back down to neutral by bringing the leg forward, relax it, and then sink into the ball. And you'll notice with every iteration of extension and then bringing it back to flexion passively, let the muscle relax, you'll be able to sink in a little bit deeper and the pain should start to subside. Now as you bring it back, you're going to breathe in. If you have it available, you can adduct the leg up to the ceiling. It means lift it up. And then you would bring it back and towards the front of the body, relax the tension, and then sink into it further. So I like to go through about 6 to 10 of these. Once you're done, you should start to feel the muscle relax and lengthen. Once we've done that soft tissue mobilization, we want to release the muscle. So Ryan's going to step back, bring his left leg behind him. And as he does that, he's going to slightly rotate his femur outward or externally. And by doing that again, it's going to align the muscle so that it's basically pulled into stretch. Now remember, the muscle flexes, it abducts, and it externally rotates, or rather internally rotates. So we have to do the opposite of that action. So that would be extending the leg back. He's going to slightly rotate it outward, but then he's going to step it in behind him to adduct the leg from the hip line. So if you do that, you'll start to feel that pressure point right through here. Okay? Now again, if you crunch down on your abs by breathing out, you'll feel a natural stretch. It'll increase the stretch. So what you can do to help emphasize it is breathe out, lean into the hip, flex the glute, and rotate across. Almost push your arm through and around, and then you'll feel a deeper stretch down the front lateral line of the hip. And then you can relax, let the muscle go. Again, breathe out, sink in, reach forward, and try to lengthen it further. Now we can use a PNF stretch technique. This is kind of a push-pull relax, right? By flexing it and then relax it. And if we go with the natural rhythmic breathing pattern, we would actually do a little bit of an opposition to that. So he's going to flex it by pulling the leg up, right, and out a little bit to flex the muscle. So he's trying to lift it up, legs in traction a little bit, so you should feel the flexion here at the hip socket. He's going to breathe out. That way he'll get the opposing oblique to anchor there. And then he's going to relax it, breathe in, and then go into that flexion through the glute, stretch, and lean forward. and see if it gives you more natural length and range of motion. That's called a push-pull release or a neuromuscular stretch. And you'll notice that when you do that, it allows you to get a little bit deeper into that elongation. If we add in a polysynaptic relationship with the eyes and the body orientation, what you can do is, again, turn your head to the left and look to the right as you do it. Okay, so let's all put those pieces together. Okay, so he's going to flex it first, bend the knee, try to lift the hip up, so he's giving a little hip flexion, and then he's going to relax it. He's going to breathe in, sink forward, flex the glute, rotate his hip inward, reach through, turn the head to the left, look to the right, and sink in. You'll notice that it gives you a little more extensibility. Okay, kind of neat. You use your sensory organs to help release the muscle groups, and that way you don't have to spend so much time trying to get the muscle to lengthen. If you do it right, you should be able to get it done fairly quick. So that's it for the stretch. We're going to move into our next muscle on our dominant side. We're going to target the quad with the big foam ball that we have. It's a 5-inch foam ball. This is our fluid fascial ball, so if you need one, make sure to reach out to us or look on the website. So we're going to use this ball to target the quadriceps. Quadriceps means 4. So we've got the rectus femoris. Underneath of it's the intermedialis, and then we have the vasti, the lateralis on the side, lateral, and the medialis on the inside. For today, what we want to focus on is 2 of the 4. It's going to be the rectus femoris, the one that attaches from your kneecap up to your hip bone, and then the vastus lateralis, the one that attaches from the kneecap up to the trochanter, or again, the elbow of the femur. Now, a lot of these guys get pulled into tension as they suspend the leg from rotating in. And if we have that rotation dominant posture, we're going to see that pretty evident. It grips the pelvis and has a tendency to pull the pelvis with it as we walk, and that can create excess rotation into the spine. So we want to reduce that. So what we're going to do again is a soft tissue mobilization technique. Ryan's going to lay down on the ball with the knee or the ball just above the kneecap into the belly of the muscle. He's going to roll down until he feels a trigger, a tender point. It's normally a good indication of nociceptors and the fascial beds, maybe a spasm, and we're going to spend time on that position. Now what we want to do is orient our body so that we resemble gait. So the leg would naturally be behind us if we were stepping forward on our right side. So Ryan's going to bring his right leg up and out to the side. By doing that, it's also going to orient the weight of his body into the ball so we create more compression. Now remember, you don't want to do so much that it makes the muscle guard because it's going to defeat the purpose. So we're going to lay our weight into the tissue, hold it there. It's going to compress the femur on the ball, and then we're going to smush basically the rectus femoris in between. And what we can do is get our body into the general orientation, again, of gait. So if our right leg was forward of us and our left leg was going back into extension, stretching that quad, your body would be oriented so that your left shoulder would be in. So he's shifting his weight to his left palm. His gaze is going to go to the left, or rather his head is going to go to the left, and he's going to look to the right. Now that's going to put his body into a position where the muscle is going to want to relax. And then as he does that, he's going to breathe in, bend the knee, start to floss the tissue between the head of the ball and the femur, and then breathe out and sink into the belly of the muscle. As you relax the knee and bring it into extension, the muscle should start to soften, and you should be able to get a little bit deeper into that bed of the muscle. Now, as you do this, also remember that as you bend, and there might be, again, a fascial bundle in there, if you pull the tissue up to the edge of the ball, try not to let it slip around it. You kind of want to block it, and you're shearing it. So you're literally using the pressure of the ball to shear this fascial tissue away from the fibers, try to get it to get into the same length relationship or direction of the fiber of your muscle in your quad. So again, you're going to breathe in. As you lift out, breathe out. Lengthen the knee, and then sink in deeper, and you can go through multiple iterations up the length of that muscle all the way up to the hip bone itself. We're only going to show you one spot on this side. Now if we wanted to target the lateral side, you could shift your weight just a little bit further over from medial to lateral so that you're orienting your body weight on top of the ball on the side, making note not to go all the way to the side of the hip. We don't want to be directly on the IT band. And then you can again identify that lateralis muscle, and then start working through the same process. Breathe out as you let the knee straight, and then breathe in as you bend. Orient your eyes to the right, head to the left, breathe out and sink and go deeper into the belly of the muscle. Once again, shoot for about 6 to 10 breathing patterns. Hopefully you'll start to feel that muscle start to soften every time you let go. Now we want to see if we can get the muscles to lengthen. So he's going to keep his left knee down on the mat, and then he's going to stack his weight so his center of mass is right up over his hips. And what we're going to do, again, is flex the muscle before you relax it. Remember, we always want to go through that flex-relax cycle. It's going to help to retrain the brain about how to let the muscle go. So he's going to basically straighten his knee out by pushing his foot into the ground to flex. As he does it, he's going to breathe out. So you're anchoring at the oblique, again, anchoring at the quad. They both fight each other. Then he's going to relax, breathe in, flex his glute, and sink forward by flexing through the opposite knee, the right knee, and the ankle. But as he does that, he's going to make sure that his left glute is flexed isometrically, so he's not let go of the pelvis, and that'll help to give more length through the quad. And then he's going to come back, breathe out, push the knee back down into the ground, hold it into flexion, then relax it, and then sink forward, and lean back in. Now once again, if we want to get the whole body involved with this, as he sinks forward by breathing in and bending through the knee and ankle, head's going to go left, eyes are going to go right as he sinks. And then he's going to come back, flex the knee, and go through multiple iterations of that breathing with flexion and relaxing. Let's get into the next muscle. The last muscle we're going to target on the dominant side is the adductor complex, and specifically the short fibers of the adductor complex. Ryan's going to be targeting his left leg today. Remember, the adductors help to basically stabilize the femur and the pelvis when we walk, and there are a set of muscles that come up and attach the femur to the pubic bone. So oftentimes when they're dominant, they'll pull the leg in, or the leg will drop in because of movement compensations, and they'll become tight and compressed. So those muscles are here, and they're right in this little pocket between your groin and the length of the femur. To isolate them, what we found is if you elevate the leg up onto a bench, it'll help you to get the weight of your leg onto the ball to compress those muscles. And we're using a 5-inch foam ball for that. And he's going to be able to rotate and pivot through his femur, because they also internally rotate the leg inward. So if I want to stretch them under pressure, I'm going to want to rotate the leg into extension. And by the act of lifting the leg up on this bench like this, then you'll notice that Ryan can actually pivot in the femoral socket, and he can rotate the leg up and down or in and out. And that's going to help to, again, floss that muscle between the pressure of the ball and the femur itself. So as you see, Ryan's kind of in a 4-point position with his leg up and abducted to the side. He's putting his weight into his palms. And ultimately, what we want to do, again, is try to get our body in a position of gait. The leg would open and stretch these muscles when your leg kicks behind you and externally rotates. So again, if we orient our body with that as the expectation, your head would be, again, to the left, your eyes would be to the right. So what you'll notice is that he breathes out as he rotates it open and breathes in as he rotates it closed. So he's going to flex it by bringing it open, breathing out, and then breathe in and let it drop down and rotate. Now as he lets it rotate down and stretches it, he's going to sink into the belly of the muscle and just let it get deeper and deeper each time. Go through the process about 6 to 10 times, breathing out as you flex it, internally rotating it, breathing in as you let it sink and soften, and you'll notice you can get deeper and deeper into those fibers. So we're looking at the brevis and longus and pectineus in this muscle grouping, and then we're going to move into our stretch. He's going to go into a 4-point on both hands and knees to start off with. Then he's going to extend his left leg out to the side, and he's going to bring it into a lateral position. Now what we want to do is keep the toes down, and he's going to then push his hip into the ground by flexing his foot towards the floor, flexing the muscles, breathing out as he does so. And then he's going to breathe in and slide the leg out further and see if he can get a deeper stretch by elongating through those adductor fibers. Now as he does that, he can lean his weight forward, bring his weight forward and kick the leg out further, breathing in. And then sit back, breathe out, push the foot down into the ground, flex the muscles, and then relax it, lift his weight forward through his hip, breathe in, bring it out further, and ask permission of the muscle to let go each time. Now once again, if we added the eyes into this, so you would notice if he was positioning himself in a position of gait, his leg would be out to the side, so his torso would be inward from the left shoulder, His gaze would be to the right and his head would be to the left as he breathes in and he sticks his leg out further. So let's repeat that one more time. You would flex it, hold it under tension, breathe out, then breathe in, sink your weight forward, turn your head to the left and look to the right and see if you can extend the leg out further. Go through it about 6 to 10 times. Then we would go into our next non-dominant side with the other sets of stretches. Let's get started. Shifting gears to the non-dominant side of the body, we're going to start targeting a muscle called the piriformis. Piriformis literally means pair, and it's a shaped muscle that attaches, or a pear-shaped muscle that attaches the trochanter of the hip bone to the sacrum on the anterior portion of the sacrum. Now the muscle acts to extend the hip behind us, externally rotate, and abduct. So oftentimes we overuse this in lieu of our glute maximus, and that can create havoc, and that we need the glute maximus to be more engaged to support the femur. So this is going to be seen as a circumduction when we walk. So you'll see a slight outsweep of the hip as you try to draw the leg back in because the muscle is so taut and the lever is shortened. So what we want to do is isolate it by placing the ball under the hip, and you'll see this with Ryan. He's going to lift his hip up. He can identify that trochanter, again, that little hip bone, okay, or the elbow of the hip bone, and then go in from there, trace it in horizontally towards the pelvis. Okay, when you're on it, you're going to feel it. Now we have to be careful of the sciatica nerve. It does go through that muscle and underneath, so we don't want to be directly on it. So you don't want to feel it tingling down the leg. If you are, try to shift your weight away from that. Okay. Now once you've found that position, what you can do is draw the leg up and over the opposite side. Now again, if it's tight, that might bark at you. And remember, our goal here is not to overdo it to the point where the muscle guards and contracts. That's happening, it's going to be very hard for you to get the muscle to relax. So take some time to find out what's comfortable for you. And again, this is going to put a lot of weight into your shoulders and your palms, your wrists. A lot of times that's not available for a lot of people. So you could use a smaller ball, the lacrosse ball. Only problem is it's pretty acute. We do have to get through the gluteal muscle to get down through it. So it is important that we actually flatten the glute out to get down there through it. So that little ball will help you to pierce the big muscle to get down in there. But if it's too much, that may not be appropriate either. So giving you some options here, maybe don't even use a ball. I have people sometimes just sit on the ground, bring the hip over and lean into the ground, and the pressure of the ground alone is sufficient for them, especially for those of you with advanced stages of this rotation issue where you're really engaging the piriformis. There might be some sciatica involved because of it. Okay, so what we want to do again is avoid the piriformis syndrome by reducing this muscle. So either way, you want to implement the same techniques, whether it's on the ground, on the little ball, or the bigger ball. The goal here again is to isolate it. Now what Ryan's going to do is pull the knee up into his chest. He's going to rotate it in medially, and he's going to lift it up. Now Ryan said off camera that he didn't have a lot of flexion. It looks like he's been working on this, so it looks good. He's drawing the leg up into the chest. He's got some flexion. Remember, he's doing the exact opposite of the muscle action. The muscle is to extend, it's to externally rotate and abduct. So now he's going into flexion, adduction, and again, internal rotation. Okay. Now, if done right, you're going to breathe out as you lift it up. And then breathe in as you let it sink down, open it up, go into that passive length. See if you can sink deeper into the ball each time. So as we go in, again, breathe out, lift up, bring it forward, and then let it go down. Now again, we're on the right side for Ryan, so if we were going to implement this as it would look like in gait, again, his leg would go up, his head would go to the left, and his eyes would go to the right as he breathes out and lifts the leg up. And then he would let it come back to neutral and sink. Again, breathe out, lift the leg up, head to the left, eyes to the right, and then relax and sink. We did that for 6 to 10 about breathing cycles, and then we're going to stretch it out. So Ryan's going to hop off the ball. And what we want to do is make sure that, again, we put ourselves into a position where we protect the spine first, protect the pelvis, and also understand the angle that needs to be accomplished in order to directly stretch the muscle. Goal is to bring the knee up and then in towards the midline of the body so that the knee is in line with the sternum. So Ryan's going to do that by, again, flexing the leg up, drawing it into the center. You'll notice that his leg is going to rotate in, so the toe is flat and rotated in, so the roof of the foot is underneath of him. If you can see him from behind, his hip bones are parallel to each other and the hips are parallel to the floor. So from here, he's going to extend his back and he's going to sink his leg back or sink into his hip and make sure that that left pelvis, since he's stretching his right, doesn't pop up. If there's an out sweep of the hip, like so, that's going to rotate and shear through his lumbar spine. And in fact, that's really not stretching the muscle, it's pulling the pelvis with it. So he's going to drop his weight down to his left forearm. And by doing that, it's going to pull the pelvis down with it. And I'm sure Ryan felt that as a deeper stretch in his back right pocket here. Now, once again, we want to start with the flex of the muscle. So he's going to push his knee down, breathe in, push down and flex the glute. So he's trying to push the knee down and away to flex it. And then he's going to breathe out, sink, flex the hip up closer to his sternum, and see if he can get more flexion out of the hip. And again, adduction by drawing the leg inward. Now, as we do this, we can go again back into that eye line and head positioning. He's going to flex, breathe in, and then relax, breathe out, turn his head to the left, eyes to the right, and see if he can sink further back, once again, keeping the pelvis neutral or parallel to the floor. Okay. So as you do that, you'll notice that the muscle gives up on you every time. You get a little bit deeper into the sink. You'll get more and more extension. We'd like to see 6 to 10 repetitions of that breathing pattern with the eyes and the head, and within no time you'll be able to get that knee all the way up to your chest. So that brings us to the end of the piriformis, and we're going to move into our next muscle. This is a soft tissue mobilization of your hamstring, and this is going to be specifically the lateral portion of your hamstring complex. You do have 3 hamstrings. The first one's your biceps femoris. If you reach under your kneecap and feel along the back side of your thigh, if you turn your toe out and bend your knee, you'll feel a tendon. And if you trace that tendon up, you'll go into the belly of the bicep femoris. Right? Now there's 2 heads to that. We're trying to get the head that attaches directly to the femur. Okay? Unfortunately, that overworks when our mechanics of our ankle start to distort or move the wrong way. So we want to reduce that tone. So what we're going to do on our non-dominant side, and for Ryan, that's going to be on his right side, right? He's going to place his leg on top of the ball. We have our 5-inch foam roller, and he's going to compress the ball so that the muscle, or rather the muscle, is compressed between the ball and femur. So if he's doing this right, he'll feel a subtle pressure. It should be a little bit uncomfortable, but manageable. And you're not going to want to guard. So the guarding would feel like your knee starts to flex back, right? And that would mean that the muscle's overstimulated. So we just want to hold the pressure on that muscle for a little bit. And then we're going to start to elongate through the tissue by extending the knee and then rotating the toe up and in. Now, as you lift that leg into extension, if you start to feel the muscle guard, it'll start to quake, right? And that's going to be a reflex guarding response. You don't want to go that far. So you can breathe in as you lift up, and that'll help to extend the back and anchor the pelvis, and then breathe out and sink into the belly of the muscle. Now, as you go through this action, we want to make sure that as we release the tension and the knee starts to come back down into flexion, you can sink a little bit each time the passive tone of that muscle is going to start to increase. So we go through this about 6 to 10 times before we move forward into our neuromuscular stretch. So we have Ryan set up here with the exercise band anchored to the wall behind him, and it's just about the height of his hip line. And that's going to help to pull his femur back into the socket, so it's a little bit of a distraction technique, and that's going to help you to get the stretch out of the hamstring. Now, to get into position, what we want to do is step our leg forward, the leg that we're going to be stretching. This is your non-dominant side. And he's going to make sure he starts to first acknowledge the relationship of his foot. So if you pull your toe up, you'll start to feel a stretch on the back side of the leg. So by dorsiflexing through the ankle or pulling the toes up, that's actually going to increase the stretch. Now, we want to make sure that the knee is anchored. So we're going to push that down into a terminal extension by flexing your quad. And then I'm going to start to hinge through my hip. Now the main thing here is that as we bend down, the femur head will glide in that little recess of the pelvis to a certain extent where the hamstring will then grab onto the pelvis. If it's taut, a couple things are going to happen. The foot will fall down, the knee will buckle, or the hip will start to rotate into the direction of the stretch. And all of those mean that the muscle is being pulled too taut. Okay, so we don't want to distort or dissociate the joint centers. We want to make sure that they're stable. Now, as we go down, we're going to sink into our hip so the opposite leg will bend, the knee will bend, the hip will bend, and you'll sink down, pushing your back behind you, your hips behind you. Now, if you go too far, you'll start to see the hip rotate or the back will start to lose its extension. So it'll go from an arch to a flexion. And that means, again, that we've moved too far. So you first want to go to the first point of resistance on that muscle where you feel pressure but not pain. Now, at the bottom of that stretch, you can breathe in and breathe out and relax and sit back a little bit, pull the toe up, flex your quad, and see if you can sink a little bit further. Now I'm going to do that again. Breathe in, breathe out, sink back. Now if we want to engage our upper body to help reduce that pressure, we can bring the opposite arm across the body, pull the other arm back behind on the same hemisphere. Breathe in, breathe out, sink and reach. And we'll go through multiple iterations of that. Now we can offer the body a little more support by turning the head into the opposite hemisphere of the stretched leg. Glide your eyes to the opposite side so you're looking into the right side for Orion. And he's going to breathe in, look right, and sink. Now as you sink, flex the quad, flex the muscles of the arch of the back, or the extensors of the back, and pull the toes up. Breathe in, breathe out, look to the right, extend the back, flex the quad, flex the muscles that pull the toe up, and sink. Good job there. So you'll notice if you get your body into this position, the muscle will naturally want to lengthen and let go. If you just sit there and kind of crank on it, a lot of times the muscle is going to fight back. This is, again, tension from the pelvis. Oftentimes the hips are getting cranked under from a slouch back position, and those muscles have to stay engaged to try to support the hip. And again, that makes them hyperactive, and we're trying to basically use the nervous system to let them go. Now, these are really important muscle groups as they have a big impact on our pelvis and by extension, our spine, our ribs, our shoulders, our neck. So we don't want to shortchange this stretch. So make sure to apply as much of this technique as you can, and know that the goal here is to get the hip to at least a 90-degree angle of hip flexion with no distortion at the knee or the toe. If you're struggling with that, continue to work on it. And if you have questions, make sure to reach out to one of your movement specialists or talk to us at admin@fluidhealthandfitness.com. And then let's move on. So this is the last muscle that we're going to be targeting for release. And this is going to be our gastrocnemius muscles, otherwise known as your calf muscles. So gastrocs are basically plantarflexures of your calf, meaning they push your heel off the ground and lift your body weight up. And they're your primary propellant, meaning that they push your body forward as you take a step forward. Oftentimes we overuse them, and especially on your non-dominant side of your body if you have rotation dominance, because your hip is less stable on your non-dominant side, so that force production has to be absorbed down the kinetic chain, and our ankle normally has to take up the slack, which requires those muscles to get stiff and, again, overworked. So we're going to show you how to reduce those with a soft tissue mobilization technique using a lacrosse ball. So Ryan's going to go onto the table. He's going to drape his leg on top of the ball. We would welcome you guys to do the same if you want to follow along. And he's going to start with the ball just on top of the Achilles, which actually the gastrocs and the soleus muscles attached to, down to his calcaneus, his ankle or his heel bone. And he's going to start by rolling up the lateral portion of that gastroc. So as he comes up the leg, or he rolls down the length of that ball, he's going to place weight into that muscle bed, and he's going to start to feel a pressure point, or again a trigger point, or again a spasm in the muscle. So the goal here is to find and isolate a tender spot, and then hold that ball on the pressure on the ball. So again, it's just like the other drills that we're doing here. We're going to take our weight of our leg, drape it across the other leg to support more pressure, or put more pounds per square inch into that bed. And if it starts seizing up, again, what's the body going to do? It's going to flex. So the toe might point down a little bit, and you're going to attempt to try to flex it so that it can't push through the tissue. So if you see that, maybe release the foot off of the other leg and give it a little second. And if that's sufficient, you can go ahead and leave it on. Okay? So again, the goal here is to put enough pressure into the muscle that the muscle starts to stretch from the tendon, and we get a nervous system release in that muscle. Now again, we're going to hold it there for about 30 to 60 seconds until the muscle starts to relax. And then we're going to start to move through the joint that the Achilles and the gastrocs attach to, and that's at the ankle. So we're going to pull the toes up into dorsiflexion, and that's going to slide those gastrocs between the fibula and tibia and again the ball, right? And then relax it, bring it down, and sink deeper into that muscle bed. Again, this is called a pin and stretch technique. It's a soft tissue mobilization. If there are collagen fibers, it'll help to break those down and start to elongate the fascial tissue. If there's a spasm in the muscle or if it's guarding, it'll help to turn down the nervous system so that muscle gets softer and we can get a greater length or extension out of that muscle. Now you have probably tons of little trigger points up these calves because once again, we use them a lot. If our hips are unstable, which most of us are, we're going to see again chronic overuse of those calf muscles. And because the foot and the nervous system has so much information in the feet, it's super important that we, again, maintain the anatomic relationships at the ankle and the foot because it stems all the way up the kinetic chain in a wave of distortion if we don't get adequate mobility from our ankle. So as a tip, remember, our goal is to get our foot closer to our tibia, and the angle at the ankle should be about 22 degrees for us to get sufficient mechanics through our knees and our hips to squat appropriately. So we want to make sure that we're looking for that relationship, and if we don't see it, we're going to want to continue to work on these muscles and get them softer so that over the course of time, we can start to see that functional range of motion. Okay, so again, you're going to do this again 6 to 10 times. You might want to breathe in as you pull up, and then breathe out and sink into the bed. And again, if you need more weight, drape more weight down from that other leg. So we've released the muscle, now we want to stretch it. We're going to do that by doing a wall stretch where we're going to kick the same foot that we just rolled on behind us. So Ryan's going to place his body so that he's pushing his hands right about the shoulder height on the wall. And he's going to step his foot back on the same leg that we just stretched. And we're going to start by getting into a position where we can keep the heel on the ground, and that'll be an indicator of the stretch. Okay, so if you go so far back or so shallow towards the wall that the heel lifts off the ground, that again is something that you're going to want to reposition. So you're going to want to get the heel on the wall, or on the floor, and then you're going to position your body so that your opposite leg is up in flexion. Now this is going to resemble the gait cycle. So he's in extension in his right leg, he's in flexion on his left, and he's pushing his body weight so that his right hand is more dominantly pushing into the wall. By doing that, he's going to set up the muscle relationships so that the muscle down there is going to want to release. So he's going to breathe out and push his toe into the ground, lifting his heel up, and then he's going to breathe in, push his heel down into the ground, and try to pull his toes up towards his shin and sink into his hips. As he does that, he can use his upper body to push down and create more force to get a deeper stretch out of that gastroc. The couple things that we're going to want to make note of. At the ankle, if the foot starts to rotate out like so as we push and the knee rotates in more medially, this is normally indicative or an indicator of a metatarsal spread at the foot, meaning the foot is doing the stretching and not the ankle. So what you're going to want to try to do is orient the foot or the toe box so that it's lined up with the middle of the tibia and the kneecap is tracking over the second toe. So again, we want to make sure that we're stretching through the right mechanism, through the ankle at the talus where the tibia and the fibula meet up with that little bone right by your ankle. And you're going to push your body weight down, sink, flex your quad, pull your toe up towards your shin, breathe in, push your arms back, and then breathe out, push through the toe box to flex the muscle. We're actually engaging it. Remember, you have to flex it before you stretch it, and then relax it, breathe in, sink down, pull his toes towards his shin, sink into the belly of the muscle, and then he's going to turn his head in towards the right and eyes to the left. By orienting his head and his eyes in this way, it's going to help to relax the muscle as he sinks, and you should start to notice that the muscle's going to give up a little bit easier, and you'll be able to get a deeper stretch. Let's get through this again about 6 to 10 times, and then we can move on to our activation. Our second segment has to do with the activation of the underactive or phasic muscle groups of the body. Certain muscles are overactive, altering the joint centers, which then alter the mechanics of those joints. Certain muscles then become weak or phasic or limited in their capacity to recruit. Today we'll show you how to engage those muscles to reestablish the natural position of the joint center, increasing your efficiency in movement and maintaining the appropriate mechanics through the body. We're setting ourselves up for an external oblique crunch on the non-dominant side. So you see Ryan's on his ground or on the ground, his legs supine, he's got his roller between his knees, and that's used as a spatial relationship, so his knees are tracking with his hips. His heels are planted on the ground or on the floor, and he's gonna make sure that he keeps his lower back in contact with the ground. You're gonna breathe out and get the lower lumbar to come in contact with the ground. Now from there, you're gonna support your head, and he's gonna be going from the right side, so he's gonna be rotating right to left. He's going to, again, breathe in, reach up with his right arm, come across the torso, sagittal flexion into transverse rotation through the trunk. You'll notice that his opposite elbow goes down towards the floor, and then he's going to breathe out to a count of 6 as he gently brings his body weight down. He's using his external oblique on his right side to pull his torso up and across the body. Now as he breathes in, he's going to make sure that that rib cage stays collapsed. He's using his abdominals. He's going to rotate across about 18 degrees. And make note that his knees are not moving, neither should yours. So you want to make sure that they stay stationary. Breathe out to a count of 6 and come back down. So you're going to want to make sure that you accomplish 2 sets of 20 repetitions. Remember, the time under tension is 2 seconds up as you breathe in, 6 seconds out as you come down. Give yourself about 45 seconds to a minute in between sets, and then move into the next strength exercise. Our third and final segment is integration. This is the coordination of multiple joint movements happening simultaneously while your body is able to maintain the appropriate force couple or muscle coupling relationships to support the joint centers and appropriate biomechanical movement patterns. This is how we upregulate your central nervous system. Once we've activated the deficient muscle group, and in this case, again, it was going to be his right oblique, we're going to make sure that we feed this into the central nervous system by going into a stabilization / integration / strength exercise. Okay, so he's going to use this exercise band once again to help him with his femoral glide. We have a little distraction technique, and not only is that going to help to pull his femur back into the hip socket, it's also going to help to create a little additional extension out of the glute, or extension dominance, as we push through into our glute to push our hips up into extension. So he's going to get a stronger contracture of his gluteal. So he's going to basically glide through the ankle so that his knee comes to the tip of his toe, sit his hip back until he feels his back want to round. So if you start seeing the back round or rotate, you've gone too far. You're going to make sure that that back stays extended and the head stays in line with the ribs. From there, he's going to breathe out, push his weight through his heel, try to keep the dome of his foot on the right side, lift his hip line, hike the hip up so that the hips are neutral, draw his arm across into protraction, make sure his left goes around into retraction, and then breathe in and slowly sink the knee over the toes, sink the hip back. Now you'll notice with Ryan, his chin stays tucked, his head is in line with his thorax. From his head to his TL junction there at the ribs to his sacrum, there's a nice straight line. He's letting his knee travel over his toe without rotating in or out, and you're not going to see any excessive flattening of the foot. All of those are indicators that you've gone too far and you want to reduce your range of motion until you can maintain perfect precision. We're trying to imprint on your central nervous system, so we want to make sure that the movement is clean and precise. So you'll see he's going down to a count of 4. He's breathing in, breathing out, coming up for 2, and then repeating. So what we would like to see is have you do 2 sets of 20 repetitions. Once again, slow 4-second eccentric stretch, a little pause at the bottom, and then breathe out and come up. Make sure that as you come to the top, your ankle and hip and knee are in extension, coming all the way up to full extension, and then coming back down to the full range of motion. Once again, 2 sets, 20 repetitions, 60 seconds in between, and that brings us to the end. This brings us to the end of your mobility and release clinic. Make sure to apply the techniques that you learned today 2 to 3 times to optimize the results. If you have questions, reach out to us at admin@fluidhealthandfitness.com or touch base with one of your movement specialists. As always, your body's designed to move, so stay in motion, and we'll see you next time in class.